Hello everyone. So I'm just going to continue the demo where I left off, talking about Sticky's verse pipe with regards to skill. But today we're going to talk about something a little bit different, and this is going to be strictly opinion, of course. But I'm going to talk about fun and talk about class interactions and which classes are fun to play against, because all the different classes have different varying degrees of fun. So yeah, let's just hop right into it. Now, of course, the big elephant in the room is that, you know, your interactions with different classes are going to be different. So for example, in the case of playing against a pyro, it's going to be a lot more fun for a scout to just chew up a pyro and spit them out than it would be for a soldier to just kind of not engage with them. So yeah, you know, what class you're playing, of course, has a huge impact. But I do want to talk about just general interactions. Of course, most of it is going to be skewed towards a demo's perspective, because that's just kind of what I play. So most of my experience of the game is from a demo perspective. But with all that out of the way, let's just hop into the first class, which is Scout. And in my opinion, Scout is in some ways just so unfair to play against, because a good scout that is good at using their movement to play high ground, and even just like the micro high ground that just makes them more difficult to get reliable splash damage on, can be really frustrating, right? Especially as a demo. It feels like you have to do so much work to win a 1v1 against a scout. That's by design, of course. Scout is a check to demo. But overall, I don't think it's that unfun necessarily. Of course, it sucks to lose, and it sucks to play a matchup that the scout is just slated to win. But it feels very, and fair is a weird word to use, but it does feel a little bit fair. Like, of course, they have the advantage, but you understand that advantage, and then you can either play your engagement or play to try and avoid the engagement or whatever. Or when you actually win that fight, it feels way more rewarding because you know you did something difficult. But when I say fair, what I mean is whether you dodge or win or whatnot, you understand is a matter of your skill against their skill and not much else. Like, if their scout misses multiple shots on you, of course there is some element of they're just messing up. But you can feel like you actually accomplished something by, like, dodging their shots. Likewise, if you just hit them in 2 shots and kill them, that's very rewarding because you just diffed them, right? Your aim was just so much better that you win that fight. So, in some sense, yes, Scout can be a very oppressive class to play against, which can be frustrating. But overall, it's still a enjoyable class to fight in some senses. At the very least, it's just so fun to kill scouts. Like, man, I hate scouts and I love killing them, right? So they are kind of fun to play against in that sense, even though they are absolutely annoying. Yeah, next up we have Soldier. And Soldier, in my opinion, is maybe the most fun class to play against in the entire game. For a couple of reasons. So, for starters, soldiers do have a lot of health, which means that they can be difficult to kill, which of course has the added bonus of being kind of rewarding when you kill them. However, the big thing is just their primary means of dealing damage, that being the rocket launcher, is really slow firing, really high damage, but it's a relatively slow moving projectile, meaning it's pretty easy to dodge, and it's much more pronounced that, you know, when you dodge, you are dodging their shot. And even less so in the case, or more so in the case of Scout, it does feel like if you are taking a fight with a soldier and you just avoid 3 rockets in a row, you are using your movement really effectively, and it's less an element of them just beefing, even though that's obviously a consideration with really anything. There are certain shots that soldiers just should hit, but it makes for really rewarding gameplay. And even beyond dodging, the other huge thing is surfing damage, because rockets are some of the most surfable damage in the entire game, because they're projectiles, their splash damage. And a lot of the time that splash damage is coming, it's hitting the floor, meaning it's almost like you can just be rocket jumping as like any class when you play against a soldier. And it requires an element of timing, it takes skill and whatnot. So it's very rewarding to surf damage from a soldier, and it's very fun to do so, right? So yeah, soldiers are a really fun class to play against. And it rewards a lot of different skills. And another thing as well, like, if a soldier is bombing and you don't see it necessarily, but you can hear it, and I don't know, there's just so many interactions you can have with soldiers that make them a very fun class to play against, and in my opinion, the most fun class to play against. Just playing to dodge rockets or surf rockets and whatnot, while also trying to output a lot of damage because they have a lot of health, is really nice. So yeah, that's soldier. Next, let's talk about pyro, which in my opinion is one of the least fun classes to play against, unfortunately, because pyro just kind of feels like almost coin flippy, and in many cases uninteractive. So of course pyro is a very what's the word I'm looking for, very polarizing class, in the sense that whatever class you're playing really influences the matchup. Because if you're like an engineer or a scout or a heavy, then yeah, you kind of don't have to worry about pyros. You just get to eat them, and that's whatever. But for really anything else, and even those classes included, like, unlike the case of a scout or a soldier, whether you're taking damage from the pyro or not, doesn't feel like a matter of your skill against theirs, because they're always going to be able to just light you on fire, right? Which is kind of unrewarding. Now I know, of course, how afterburn works. They of course get more afterburn if they can burn you longer, but the flamethrower is not a hard thing to aim, of course. So yeah, it's just uninteractive in that sense. But also air blast is so annoying. Like, I don't mind air blast existing necessarily. I do think that, movement controlling mechanics like that are generally bad for the game, but pyro as a class would be so terrible without air blast that I understand why it exists. But the fact that it literally negates your movement until you hit the ground again just makes it so uninteractive, because suddenly all the things that matter in basically every other class interaction of being able to surf damage, being able to strafe one way or another based on the damage you're taking, all that defensive movement counterplay that makes TF2 so much more interesting than other games, just doesn't exist against a pyro, well, specifically a pyro air blast. On top of the fact that air blasting projectiles kind of sucks if you're a projectile class. But yeah, it's just a generally unfun class to play against. On top of the fact that pyro's damage largely is more continuous rather than discrete large chunks of damage. Now, of course, there are like flare punches and whatnot, but by and large, it's more of a slow death, and you're just hoping to kill them. And especially if you are a projectile class, you're kind of just playing the rock, paper, scissors game of trying to time and bait out their air blast so you can punish it or whatnot. It's just generally not a very fun class to play against, I think. Plus the fact that you can win the fight and still die to after. Yeah, there's just a lot of factors to pyro toward which makes it not a very fun class to play against, unfortunately. But yeah, next we have demo, and I'm gonna try to not be too biased. I play against really good demos all the time, right? And a big element of mid fights in general are two demos 1v1ing until the rest of the team shows up. So I definitely have a lot of experience playing against really good demos, and I do pride myself on being someone who is pretty decent at dodging spam, at least, but big one being I'm quite decent at not dying to traps and not just walking through doorways that I expect to be trapped. So as a result, I tend to like the demo versus demo matchup, and there's a couple reasons. So for starters, stickies are pretty easy to dodge at close to even mid-range, because if you expect, the same way that you dodge any projectile, where, you shift up your movement when you expect them to be firing, is particularly effective on stickies, because of course they have an arm time, they don't just deal splash. But on top of that, yeah, that same dynamic applies to pipes. So of course, demo maybe more so than any other class, you can just move really, really well and win the engagement without taking a lick of damage, which is really, really rewarding. On top of that, actual, like, not necessarily knowledge, but paying attention is highly rewarded, because how you take a fight against a demo is heavily influenced by how much health you have. Because if you have 101 HP, then you can be a lot more aggressive and comfortable knowing that you can't just die to one pipe, right? So there's a lot of elements that make playing against a demo kind of fun, but I understand at a more casual level, if you're just dying to sticky traps and playing in like mid-range where demo just destroys you, especially like depending on your class, because of course if you're like an engineer or a heavy or something, then yeah, demo is just going to eat you alive. But overall, I feel like from just a basic, you know, default class level, just imagine someone with basic move speed and like a shotgun or something. Demo's pretty rewarding to play against, in my opinion, and I enjoy playing against demo. Yeah, I think it's a pretty fun class to play against once you kind of get in that rhythm. Maybe that's just me who, you know, has to play a 1v1 against a demo, you know, multiple times per game, every game. But yeah, once you get in that rhythm, it can be quite rewarding. So yeah, that's demo. Next we have engineer. And engineer is curious. Engineer is another kind of uninteractive class to play against, because namely like the sentry. Either the sentry is up and you are a class that can take out the sentry, in which case you take out the sentry and then you take the fight. Or you can't take out the sentry, like if you're a scout or something. Now, of course, there are ways to close the distance or whatnot, and the sentry can only, you know, lock on so quickly and rotate so quickly. So, of course, there are certain like niche things you can do about it, but by and large, it's a matter of, do you know the gun exists? Okay. If you don't, you just die, depending on how committed you are. If you do, then you can either take it out or you don't. And if you can't take it out, then you just don't go there. It kind of just restricts your options, and a lot of the time it feels like someone else has to take care of the problem, or I guess in a casual setting you just switch classes to someone who can take care of the problem. So in many respects it can just be a nuisance, if nothing else. In a competitive setting, like a mini sentry engineer being run all the time is just a nuisance. Like as a demo, don't really have to worry about it too much, because, you know, all those minis will just die to one well-placed sticky. But it's just annoying. And again, just taking like non-stop ticks of damage is just annoying. Oh, it's demo's ending. Let us load up another one. So yeah, engineer without the gun is just kind of like a default class. Again, shotguns, you can be avoiding damage or whatever. There is some reward there. Could just load up another bagel, I guess. But yeah, generally on the less fun side of things, in my opinion, just because sentries are an absolute nuisance to deal with. Okay, next. And one thing I should mention is the sentry gun on last can be kind of annoying to deal with, and something that you absolutely want to spam down if you're trying to just rip a double sack or something, and often placed in positions that are very difficult to spam down, so sometimes it's just not even worth it. And that can be kind of obstructive, even though I think generally level 3 sentries on last are healthy for the metagame. But anyway, that's engineer. Next we have heavy. Heavy is kind of middle of the road. So it has some disadvantages in that the amount of damage heavy deals is mostly continuous. So as a result, your movement feels less impactful versus slower firing weapons, which is not good. I like when that defensive movement is rewarded. And also heavy has a lot of HP and outputs a lot of damage, so you kind of just need to kill them instantly, otherwise you just kind of die if they're revved. Now, of course, that being said, there are some things that make killing a heavy rewarding, at least for demo, from a demo perspective, because you can just kill heavies before they kill you, with insane amounts of burst damage, which is really, really rewarding as a demo specifically. It makes playing heavy kind of fun. Now, of course, in a 6's setting, it's less pronounced, but in other settings, you know, being able to abuse the heavy's slow movement and like playing around corners with splash damage or whatnot can be nice as a scout as well. Like that is a case where your movement is actually like fast enough to outmaneuver the heavy and mess with their aim or whatever. So there's definitely some reward. And also, the high health is kind of a double-edged sword, because while it makes your interactions with the heavy, it definitely stresses the fact that, you know, this class deals so much just continuous damage. It does also make it really rewarding to hit those 100 damage shots rather than those 50 or 60 damage shots. So your aim does matter in a lot of your interactions with heavy. So again, overall, it's kind of middle of the road. I think in a 6's team fight setting, heavy is a big nuisance. I think that, you know, the classic boogeyman of heavy to mid would be really annoying and awful to play against. But in a microcosm 1v1 kind of situation, I think a heavy is kind of middle of the road as far as funness to play against. Okay, next we have Medic. Do I even go over Medic? I mean, Medic is fine to play against. Actually, one of the interesting things is, like, Medic you play against in a more offensive role than rather, like, strictly 1v1 or defensive, where you're trying to get that pick. So it is interesting to try and hit good shots that the Medic can't surf. Of course, if you're a demo, you're trying to burst them down. If you're a scout, you're trying to just two-shot them or just chip them down, because it's difficult for them to surf scattergun damage. And as a soldier, like, nothing feels better as a soldier than just bombing a medic, headshot rocketing them, and then being able to just get an easy 2-rocket on them. So yeah, interactions with medic are generally quite fun. And of course, as far as medic's offensive capabilities, the crossbow is a pretty fast-moving projectile, but slow firing, so you can kind of anticipate that bow and try and avoid it. So overall, medic is actually one of the more fun classes to play against, even though, of course, it's a very one-sided interaction. Most of the time, medics are trying to just live and get out rather than kill you. But yeah, still generally a fun class to play against. Moving on now to Sniper. Is Sniper the least fun? Yeah, Sniper's probably the least fun class to play against. I know that I like just trash on Sniper all the time on my channel. I don't necessarily apologize for it, because I still think most of what I say is pretty valid. But of course, there is some opinion to it. But overall, Sniper's just kind of the least interactive class to play against. And another one where your matchup, like what class you're playing, heavily shapes how you interact with Sniper. Because similar to how, like, as a soldier playing against a Pyro, if you don't have a shotgun equipped, with, you know, in 6's you'll almost never do, your interaction is just, you don't really engage and let someone else deal with the problem, because you don't want to just feed them a rocket for no reason when anyone else on your team can kill that Pyro pretty easily. Yeah, for Sniper, that's even more pronounced, because if you are, for example, a medic or a demo in 6's, your solution to deal with the Sniper is to literally just not play the game and just sit tight while your soldier bombs them. And even then, if you're the soldier bombing, yes, you kind of get to do something, but they can always just, like, body shot you, and then you're just a sitting duck floating in the air, and then you die. And all of these are just so uninteractive, because if a sniper is playing at range, then there's very little that you can do to touch them, while they, of course, are lethal to you, which is just generally uninteresting and unfun to play against. All the different factors that I've talked about that make engagements against other classes fun, such as the possibility of surfing damage, like defensive movement as a means to dodge those slow firing weapons, as well as like the health pools that they have and the amount of damage you can deal to them, like weighed against, you know, their threat to you. All these things make for really interesting and interactive, I don't want to say interactive interactions, but I can't think of anything else. Interactive fights, I'll say. All of these make for a lot of interest there, and Sniper kind of has none of those, unfortunately. So it's either you're close range and you just kind of have a free kill. Most of the time they can just hit the headshot if they're much better. But it's either, you know, heavily weighed in your favor of just kind of a free pick if you're close range, or if it's far range, it's just a class that you don't engage with if you can afford to. So overall, generally, probably the least fun class to play with, just because it's very uninteractive and makes for very uninteresting engagement. But yeah, last we have Spy. Spy's an interesting case because a lot of the time your interactions with Spy, especially in a competitive setting, is more so about information than actual DM. Because just understanding that someone's on a Spy, or on Spy, and understanding where they're at is kind of half the battle. Overall, Spy, I think, is, again, kind of middle of the road. There are some downsides, or some aspects that make Spy a little less fun to interact with, namely just kind of backstab jank. Of course, yeah, there's some element of just annoyance when the Spy is on your screen and you're still getting backstabbed. Of course, I understand that, you know, it has to do with, you know, networking, and on their screen it does look like they're Matador stabbing you or whatever, doing whatever trick stab, which is fine, but that feels kind of unrewarding when, like, for a fraction of a second you look one way, but, you know, they never really leave your sight, but you still get backstabbed. So some of that is a little less fun. But by and large, I think Spy is, you know, still perfectly rewarding to play against. And there is also the element as well of, you know, if they're trying to get out with Cloak, then you can kind of predict where they're going and whatnot, which makes for some interesting decision making. In a competitive setting, Spy is mostly just, you know, if they exist, then they die. So it's just a matter of them getting that stab or whatever while they exist. So it is largely a matter of either expecting the Spy to be there and being ready for it, or getting caught off guard. But I think overall it's not that unfun, particularly Spy, I think, is pretty middle of the road. So yeah, that's kind of my opinion for all these different classes, and how fun they are to play against. Now, of course, I'm sure everyone's going to be like, oh, look, the competitive player thinks the competitive classes are fun to play against, which I'm sure if I played against full-time... Actually, no, you will not be able to convince me Pyre's a fun class to play against, sorry. You know, I'm not saying that these classes are better or worse or have any more or less merit in being played or played against just because of how fun and interactive they are to play against. Of course, you know, it doesn't matter that much, it's just a matter of fun. But yeah, there's definitely distinctions and definitely aspects of the game that I find more rewarding and I find more interesting in these class interactions that lend themselves towards making some classes more or less fun to play against. But yeah, that's all I have to talk about today. Not strictly competitive oriented necessarily, and just a matter of opinion, but something fun I figured I'd talk about. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you later.